joining. You are in the right place. We will be joining Bev Hancock shortly. It's just wanted to give us sort of a quick introduction, a little bit of a sort of the reason why we're actually doing this in the first place. And those of you that attended our January showcase will have seen we had about 23 speakers do about 5 minutes each. Just a little bit of a snippet of the work that they can kind of do. And in our effort of really being proactive with our customers and our speakers and kind of forming these partnerships where you can get to understand, some of the great work our speakers do, we've kind of made a natural progression to the January showcase. And now we have speakers that are, instead of doing their 4, 5, 6 minutes, they will now do 20 minutes and just the one speaker. And then over and above that, there is a chance to connect with Bev after that. So we got a 20-minute session ahead of us. Bev is going to stay on the call. So if there's any questions and if there's any sort of chemistry, she will stay on for, as long as we need it, certainly up until 4 to 10 o'clock if need be. But once again, huge welcome to you all. Big welcome to Bev. And I'm going to hand you straight over to her. Bev.
Thank you so much, Paul. And it's so lovely to be here. I'm going to start sharing straight away, and I'm going to put my timer on so that we keep the session on track. All right, let me do that again. That's better. It's so lovely to be here today, and I am really looking forward to spending this time with you, Paul. Thank you so much for the invitation. And today is very much talking about wisdom from the watering hole. I work across the world with leaders. As a conversational specialist, I am an interactive global speaker. I much prefer to have conversations than I do to just talk at you. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I want to work with you to help facilitate and lead the conversations that make a difference. As you can see, the work that I do is around leading through conversation. And in conversational leadership, there are essentially 2 levels of conversation. The first is the very, very noisy level where we're in the trenches and we're having the daily conversations that can sometimes be difficult and uncomfortable. And then there are those long-term conversations that are more conscious, they are more thoughtful, they are more proactive. And this is the space that I want us to spend today. There's a lovely Arab proverb that says, "May you live in interesting times." And there's no doubt, if we look at our current social, political leadership dialogue at the moment, it's very messy, it's very polarized, but it is also catalyzing a new conversation. And I want us to use this as an opportunity to say, what are the real and authentic conversations that we could be having as leaders of the future? I'm going to ask you to really get engaged today. I'm going to keep the chat open. So if you would like to put your thoughts in the chat, really happy to see what you have to say. We're also going to be using interactive technology as we move along. And we are going to have a look at how we can have the most powerful conversations, both in our organizations, our culture, that move us forward into the future. So if I look at leadership in the future, I think as leaders, we need to have more questions than answers. We somehow need to find this balance between the deep legacy knowledge we have of the past, the new, fresh thinking of our young people, and then also to realize we are walking into such an unknown future that we need to get comfortable with asking the questions that we don't have the answers to. So I asked AI to go into the future, and I've chosen a specific year, which is 2063. You'll see why a little bit later. And to say, what would leaders of the future look like then? What would leaders need to be in that future? But before I go and tell you what they said, I'd really like to hear what you think. So I'm going to ask you to take out your mobile phones, if you could just maybe connect with the QR code, or if that's not working for you, you can go to your browser, go to www.menti.com, and you can use the code 8727-3278. what I'd like to know is in 2063, just using 3 words, how will great leaders of the future enterprise be described? What do you think? Just 3 words. Could you connect with me and let's see what comes out? Take yourself way into the future. We're now looking at our children and our children's children's future. How would we want to describe those leaders? Lovely, visionary, consistent, empathetic. What else? There's something to be said about mining the wisdom in the room. The one thing that I've realized, despite the fact that I've studied and I've got degrees and I spend a lot of time researching, is that really, ultimately, at the end of the day, the wisdom sits in the room. They're engaged. What else? Ethical, adaptable, diverse and inclusive, visionary, forward-thinking. Oh, I'm loving these words that's coming out. This is the language of the future that we are starting to bring into being. And it is so incredibly powerful. And what is interesting is that as we have a look at the words that are coming out here, think about the kind of leadership that we have now and the conversations that we may need to have to shift towards this. Because what did AI say that we need in terms of leadership? They said we need 5 different kinds of leaders. We need regenerative visionaries who are prepared to look at the big picture for society, for business, for the planet. We need adaptive sense makers who can handle this complexity as we go into the stage of AI and who can lead fluid organizations. We need to be augmented, mature communicators who can communicate across cultures, across global teams, using both technology and great in-person techniques. I love this description of swarm leaders. Instead of big monoliths of organizations, we need to lead small teams who can do the job that is needed, then comes back to the hive and waits for their next job. And lastly, and most importantly, we need to be trust architects, because trust is the foundation of good future leadership. Now, the reason why I chose 2063 is because Africa actually has a vision, and our young people are asking for leaders who are more empathetic, who can balance both the needs of business and people, who are looking at both the present and what we can get from the present, but also who recognize that they are custodians and stewards for future generations. And the Africa 2063 vision is very powerful. It's one that really encourages young people to own their future. It's about being integrated and prosperous and peaceful and being a dynamic international force. And with the global north getting older and older and older, the youth of Africa are our future. So let's really just, as the world awakens, let's get together to explore some of the lessons of Africa. Because having come from Africa and working globally, I've come to realize that we have a lot to share in terms of youth-centered leadership with our reverence for ancient wisdom and storytelling. As we try to find the balance between AI and people in the world today, I think the words of Nelson Mandela, where he says that Ubuntu is the profound sense that we are human only through the humanity of others, may be the key that we are looking for to be able to achieve the work that we need to as future leaders. It is taking the best of the I and the best of the we. And we recognize that I am strong because we are strong. We are strong because I am strong. And while our leaders are having really, really messy conversations at the moment, let's look to some of the giants of Africa for some of these leadership lessons. Elephants don't lead by force. They lead by trust. And we're going to, in the 3 years that I've been studying them, I've learned such leadership lessons from them. And I want to share some of those with you today. And we start with the leadership of the herd, which is shared by the bull and the matriarch, but the matriarch is the main leader of the herd. And her role is to nurture, to be fiercely protective, and have a steadfast leadership that enables the sustainability and the long-term survival of the herd. She's very much a democratic leader. She does not use command or control. Rather, she invites her leaders to work with her, and together they lead the herd. She's not interested in individual pursuit. She's not interested in individual glory, something that is so different from the leaders we're seeing at the moment. But what about the bull? The bull also has a very strategic role to play in the elephant herd. His role is the survival of the species, and it is a lonely role. He leaves the herd as a teenager and he goes out on his own. And because of his size and strength, he is able to survive. But the reason why he needs to be on his own, because his role is a very aggressive one. And for him to stay with the herd can actually put them in danger. As humans, we have both the matriarch and the bull within us. Fully human leadership harnesses both the male and the feminine energy, and we need to get it beyond gender stereotypes here to harness the fully human leadership that is required for our people in a way that is correct for the environment at the moment. That is one thing that elephants are so brilliant at. The matriarch is always reading the environment, responding to it, working with her elder leaders to make sure that the herd has exactly what it needs when it needs it. If you haven't read this book, I can highly recommend it. The story of the elephant whisperer is quite profound. He is a conservationist, and with no experience, he took on a rogue herd of elephants because if he didn't, they would be destroyed. And he thought, as so many of us leaders do, that he was creating a safe environment for them. But within 24 hours, the matriarch, driven by fear, had broken through all of the reserve protections and gone to go and seek what she knew. As much as she knew it was bad, it was the only thing that she knew. And we need to realize that when people are afraid, when people are fearful, they will react, they will not respond. So when he got them back, he decided to take a completely different approach. It was a very unconventional approach. He chose to connect with them. And in doing so, he realized that we have got so much to learn from him. One of the most powerful comments that came out of his book was, "They whispered to me." He didn't see himself as the expert. He connected with them. He listened to them. He built a relationship with the matriarch. And he realized that their ability to communicate is so organic over long distances that it allows them to interact with their environment in a much more powerful way. And that teaches us 3 lessons. First of all, that trust is an accelerator and a currency of high performance. It is also the ability to listen, to adapt, and to co-create ecosystems. Ecosystems is what will give us the strength. These strategic partnerships, the collaboration, the cross-silo work will create the ecosystems that will ensure our long-term survival. And then they also teach us that they do this one moment at a time, one interaction, one conversation. And it is to the watering hole the elephants come to build the cultures that sustain their strategy, that sustain their purpose and their survival. At the watering hole, the matriarch works with her team. This is her executive, and in her executive conversations, she doesn't command, she listens. She knows that tomorrow she might not be here, so she takes time to pass on the generational wisdom to the next in line and to the next in line and the next in line, so that the body of leadership gets stronger and stronger and stronger. On-the-job training, youngsters learn from their more experienced peers to survive in the wild. But what they teach us It's the power of play. The power of play is so important. If you want to experiment, have fun, collaborate, get your teams to experiment. Our young teenage males are perhaps one of my greatest concerns. They learn skills. When they leave, they form loose bachelor herds led by a more mature male because they, as I said earlier, incredibly dangerous to themselves and to others. And what we have found, and research has shown, that older males who nurture and mentor younger males decrease the aggression and allow them to be a lot more productive. This is one of the passionate calls of my heart, is that we reach out to our young men. We do a lot of work with our women's group. We do a lot of work with gender-based violence and discussions around women. But are we having conversations with our young men and helping them navigate this very complex and sometimes lonely world that they find themselves in? So the question I have to ask you, where are the watering holes? I'd love if you could just put in the chat. Where are the watering holes in your organization? And these are not the water coolers. Where are the meetings? How do you use your town halls? How do you get people together? How are you using hybrid work to create water holes, to strengthen, for people to learn, to be able to ensure that our cultures are driving strategy? One of the biggest pieces of work that I do with leaders around the world is to help them realize that their communication and their culture will either make their strategy or they will destroy their strategy. So where are the watering holes that you have with your teams? Where do we start as we do this? I love the Zulu greeting, Sawubona. It means so much more than good morning. It means I see you. I want you to think about that for a moment. What does it mean to be truly seen and heard? And for somebody to respond, Yebo, Sawubona, I see you too. So I'd like us to go back to Menti and ask you to just put in your thoughts here. What would change in your organization if you powerfully used culture and communication to drive your success? Enrico, I see you see big operations meeting, daily rocks. I love that. I've read about your daily rocks. They look really exciting to connect and ensure strategic output. Brian, online forums, social media groups. I love that. Where else do you meet? Please, won't you go back to Mentimeter? Let me put the code back up for you to make sure that you've got that. And won't you just tell me what would change in your organization if you used culture and communication to drive success? This is one of the most important questions that we should be asking ourselves as leaders. And as you do that, the work that I do is very bespoke to organizations. Conversations are very personal. Every organization has its own type of conversation. So whether I'm doing coaching, whether I'm doing strategic conversations, whether I am helping you develop your corporate strategy, whether I'm doing culture and values work, I find that when we get together and we ask the simple question, what are the conversations that we need to have in our organization? Everything tends to change. We will have authentic organizations with more connection between leaders and teams. That word authentic resonates so strongly for me because ultimately what Donald Trump is doing for us at the moment is he is making us question whether or not our purpose statements, our values, is authentic or it's performative. It's a wonderful conversation for us to be having. Conscious leaders sit down and have brave conversations. And the watering hole prepares us for the journey. That's what this is about. It's the journey of our businesses, of our strategies, of our visions being brought to life. And to do that, the journey is not quiet. It's not gentle. It's messy. It's busy. Do we find time during this busyness to find time for quiet conversations, for strategic ideas, for brainstorming, for the conversations that are really going to take our organizations forward? I really believe that we have a responsibility as leaders of the future. Currently, we are using up the world's resources by the time we get to August. And I am passionate about conscious leaders who are asking themselves deeper questions. As a mom of young men, as a leader of teams, as a leader of organizations, what are we doing to ensure that we create a better future for those to come? And I'd love to leave you with this final quote from Stephen Hawking, that man of such intelligence who's made such an impact on the world. He said, "Let us fight for every woman and every man to have the opportunity to live healthy, secure lives filled with opportunity and love. We are all travelers journeying together into the future, but let us work together to make that future a place we really want to visit." Thank you so much for taking the time to be part of this, to listen. I would love to hear your thoughts, any questions, anything that you would like to challenge, any conversations you'd like to provoke in this space. I'm just going back to the chat. It says, "My friend runs the character company aimed at growing great young men." I am so glad to hear that. I'm not quite sure what your name is, but it says they work with young men without positive father role models to build character. We need these mentorship programs that are so, so, so necessary. Any questions? Enrico, yes, you have a question.
Bev, I always have something to say. I have to say, like, the trust architect is one of the coolest ways to phrase anything. I was instantly like, where's my book? I need to start making notes. It's a flipping great, a great line. But I think that the most special thing, like, we are on this journey of creating meaningful connections. And I realized like a week or two ago that meaningful connections are created through shared experiences.
Yes.
And when you said we are only human through others, the Nelson Mandela quote, I instantly was like, yes, man. We often forget the value of connecting with others, and not just our own ability to connect, but the shared experience that comes with it. And it kind of leads to the influencing the younger generation as well. I used to joke and say I was a asblikkind, a dustbin kid. And I found the right mentor at the right time in my life, and he enabled me to achieve greatness. But it was that shared experience of him taking a risk on a human being. Yeah, just overall, so many random ass notes that I have here. But yeah, impactful, valuable. I feel a little bit guilty knowing where I am in life and people that have enabled me. And you don't always reflect. Are you giving back to everyone? Where are you fitting into the herd? Are you taking responsibility over people? Do you care for people? Do you have a safe space for them? Oh, last note before I'm done. You said when people are fearful, they react and they don't respond. And that's one of the coolest things to actually, like, just to hear again, because we know these things, but we often forget about these things. And you go through all this strategic change in your company, and there's historic things that are in place, things that have always worked. And when things are going to be changed, there is going to be a little bit scary. We are going to be challenged, but understanding that people will tend to go back to that safe space where they feel comfortable. And it's not always just, change, but just respecting the journey, the adventure that we're on, and being a little bit empathetical to people and giving them an opportunity to to grow alongside us. So yeah, just some notes from my side, Bev.
Thanks, Enrico. I tell you something. Actually, I'm glad we're getting the recording because I think I'm going to take your notes and bring them back into the keynote, which will be great.
I am going to have to invoice you for that, Bev. I am going to have to.
I was expecting that. Don't worry. Before we move on to our next question, I just want to highlight on something you said. You talked about shared experience. And I think that human-centered leadership for me is we so often depersonalize leadership and we make it about a structure, a strategy, a job, a gender, a program, a project. When you have shared experience and shared meaning, we listen to each other's stories. And I think this is where the whole philosophy of Ubuntu is so incredibly powerful. When you listen to a person's story and you connect with their story, you have to connect with them as a human being. You cannot connect with them as an entity, as a block, as a group, as a demographic. You connect with them as people. And that shared meaning, shared experience is one of the biggest trust builders. Now, I see that we have somebody with their hand up. Please won't you tell me what your name is, because I don't want to call you NB328551.
Oh, sorry, it's Geraldine.
Yes, Geraldine.
Just for some reason, I can't change.
Don't worry about it.
I've done it incorrectly once and I live with it forever. So I was just going to say thank you. I mean, the elephants were just such a wonderful story. And, I'm just reflecting, we've been through a huge change journey. I've got a huge team and the trust was very low. They saw me coming in to just disrupt everything and put them all in survival mode where they literally felt like they were fighting for their lives. And it's so exactly what you were saying. It happens one conversation at a time that you start to build that trust. And I think, for 6 months, that was what I did. And it was also those intimate conversations, the one-on-one conversations. And you have to be, as a leader, so intentional about being authentic in every single interaction. You can't let it's such a huge burden, because you can't go back on the message you're trying to get across or how you're trying to be. You can't mess that up even once, otherwise the trust is gone again and you have to start from scratch. So that just resonated with me so much. It has been a journey of intentional conversations, being personal, one person to another, being authentic in every engagement. And you have to realize that it takes time. I said, I wish I had a magic wand and you could say, trust me, like the snake in the Jungle Book, but it doesn't work like that. And people have to experience you. They have to experience you, as I say, and in a consistent way before that trust starts to build.
And consistency is such an important part of trust. You mentioned in the chat that we're working in the hybrid environment now. And one of the things that I did way before COVID was actually look at what proper engagement, deep engagement online looked like. And I've been watching people go into hybrid and they're not doing it particularly well. I think that we have to be as intentional with how we design those systems. And I loved what you said. And Geraldine, I'm going to give you perhaps one little thing that might help a little bit, and that is being authentic is being allowed to screw up as well.
Oh, yes.
And
you have to be able to say, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
right?
the authentic leader can say, I screwed up, I'm sorry. I learned that as a single parent. I learned that as a really, really hard lesson.
And I mean, I think it made me more real as well to the team, where I could go back and go, I know I was really hard last time. I was pushing the pressure that I was feeling onto you, and I'm really sorry. That is my job, is to be the buffer, not to push the pressure down. And I will try really hard not to do that again. And as I say, then they see him as a person.
They do, and that's where that connection takes place. Paul, you had your hand up.
Thank you. Nice, rich presentation this morning. Monday morning got us all thinking. Just the watering hole example. Could you give us a few examples? I mean, maybe the one I'm thinking of now is when is this an example? When sort of the USB team got together and we put on the January showcase. It was a 6-month project at least, and we all got together. Are those kind of opportunities? Would you call that like a watering hole moment where, you know, you could
definitely, Paul. In fact,
yeah.
in fact, Paul, the showcase itself was a watering hole. It was a place for us all to experiment and learn. Enrico will know how nervous I was before that video went out. But yes, and I think perhaps just a business example I can give you, and Paul, very much what you're saying with your team. Every time you get together with your team, and I know that you bring your team together to collaborate with each other, you've got a very inclusive model. You know, I know every person in your team is there and has a voice. I recently worked with a client. I've been working with him for the last 3 years, and it started off as as an executive coaching conversation with the leader himself. And he tended to be very reactive, particularly regarding finances, and he would go off pop and he would yell at his leaders and all of that kind of thing. And that's what we worked on. And Geraldine, you were talking about those intentional conversations. And over a period of 3 to 6 months, he did that really intentionally. And all of a sudden, his leaders were coming to him and saying something's changed. Yeah. So a coaching session is a watering hole. So what we did then is that we got all of his leaders together over a period of about 10 months. And we worked together in an intentional program to build up this trust, because as Geraldine says, it's trust is not a single conversation. It really isn't. And it's something that you've got to build and you've got to enable. And sometimes leaders feel the pressure of having to be seen to be well when they don't know how to do it well. And these watering holes allow you to be able to do that. So we did that. We then created an online platform where they could go and chat and learn and have resources that they could download to be able to do that. So you have both synchronous and asynchronous channels that you can use for watering holes. You think of private Facebook groups. LinkedIn groups used to be a big thing. I don't think they are at the moment. I know Facebook groups, there are a lot of them that still do. I belong to a couple of them and they're quite useful. So you can use online. You can use, Paul, your one-on-ones with your teams are absolutely are probably one of the most valuable investments of your time, because that's where you can say to your team, how can I support you? Where are we going with our strategy? And it's not about all being soft and fluffy. It really is getting people to feel that they can own their space and to be able to achieve what it is that they need to achieve. Geraldine, you wanted to come in?
I just wanted to say one example, because you have to take your opportunities where you get them as well. I had some teams who were two teams that were really not, they were clashing. And as I say, it was a reaction of all the change and everything that was going on. So I called a kind of an intervention with everybody in the room. And the one team were in the room and the other team joined online. And I said, absolutely not. It's an in-person session. We'll make another plan. But I used the time to talk, you know, we just ended up talking with the one team that was in the room. That went so far to start building that trust. And as I say, it was a mix-up. It didn't work out the way it was supposed to work out. But actually, just saying, look, we've got these 2 hours in the diary. Let's sit here and chat. How are you feeling? What's going on? I mean, they started sharing such personal. And really being vulnerable in that space. It was absolutely amazing. So you also have to, your watering holes can be anything. They don't have to be structured. They don't have to be, you can literally take the opportunity wherever it presents itself.
That's absolutely spot on. Brian, I think from a better place to work place as well, I think also really great examples of creating those conversations that are watering holes, that are really focusing in on the needs, the direct needs, and giving a platform and a voice to employees to actually say, what do I need from you as a leader? And that's such valuable feedback. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that it works effectively because it deals with people on a personal, confidential basis.
Mm.
So the whole team gets together and they all do the evaluation, and that drives strength amongst the people because they can speak to the system confidentially, but they can see the results in a team format, which actually highlights where there are specific needs that can be addressed. So yeah, it works very effectively in situations like Geraldine is mentioning.
Yeah, it's a very, very powerful system. Any other thoughts? Any other questions? Any other feedback? It's the kind of space where I'd love somebody to pop up and say, I really didn't agree with you on that. It's not often that we do that on these public forums. Yes, Enrico.
I'm not gonna disagree on
Mhm.
anything, but I'm thinking now around the comments from Geraldine's side. So I'm gonna come via Japan to make a loop here with this thing. I love looking at what's happening on things like YouTube to kind of see the trends with things. There's younger generations that drive specific needs around what they want based on the content that they create and consume. And it's one of the most interesting things. Like about, let's say, 5 years ago, you had this Mr. Beast explosion where everything was bigger, crazier, better. Like it was pure chaos because there was a certain time in our lives where everything was boring and plain. We just came out of COVID. We were bored, like nothing is fun. And then everything became bigger and bigger and bigger. And now, about a year ago, there started happening this change where unedited content became this successful thing because people stopped trusting what was happening in the process because certain things got cut out. And recently, yes, I think it was in Diary of a CEO with Daniel Priestley. I can't remember now, but they had a conversation around Donald Trump's success by utilizing social media content, uncut social media content. The dude had like 40 hours of social media content in comparison to Kamala Harris's 7 hours, and her stuff was very like curated, and he was just sitting there having conversations. And when Geraldine said now, like they had this 2-hour session, I was like, yes. That's the moments where these big things happen, because we can't just quickly have a cup of coffee, say what we want to say and get out. There's these moments that allow us to continue conversations, moments for us to be authentic, because we're in the space together for a proper length of time. And if we create these water holes, we kind of need to go in with the intention of how much time can I spend at the water hole, rather than just trying to create micro water holes. Like with our daily rocks meeting, it's a great water hole, but it's a very high impact water hole. And it doesn't always lead to that authentic experiences where people can be vulnerable, because you're going to have 7 confident people in a space and 1 person that's not confident. And that team is going to push him down. But now if you actually have opportunities to have conversations and that person can see that I'm able to be vulnerable, we start building trust and we start being authentic, and we can have long-lasting change within our culture because of the commitment that we make to spend time together.
Great, Enrico. Thank you. I was wondering if there was one more thing that was going to come out there, because that was a quick trip to Japan. but you're absolutely right. You know, it's those moments, and perhaps, you know, just going back to the hybrid as well. One of the things that I've really enjoyed, I do a series called Conscious Leadership Conversations with young leaders in South Africa when I'm based in London, and one of the keys that we've learned to be so important, and Enrico, I'm sure from, you know, the world that you come from, and this doesn't have to be an expensive thing. There are a couple of things that are vital to a hybrid conversation. Number one, the sound and camera need to be right. Okay. So that you can have an inclusive conversation. Generally, what happens in hybrid is it's the conversation in the room with the people, the virtual people peering through the window. They're not part of the whole conversation. The second thing is if you have got an in-room and an online person, especially if the main presenter is online. Make sure that you have a facilitator in the room and a facilitator online, and they are working together. And what we've been able to do is that we've been able to have these dynamic in the room sessions with me coming in from London, designing the sessions, and these young people over a period of 4 sessions, you could literally see the level of their confidence and maturity rising, because we created table discussions with mentors where they could talk. They would then have panel discussions where the young people would come up with the questions rather than standard panel questions being asked and they just become passive listeners. We can use interactive technology, but the big thing is that the design of these watering holes must be intentional. When you have an opportunity of 2 hours of time to spend with your people, embrace it. Don't say to yourself, oh, well, let's just kind of like now go and gossip and chat and that sort of thing. Use it as an opportunity to get people to share their stories. What that does for your organization is worth absolute gold in terms of building the culture that you're looking for.
Very good. Bev, I finally understand what the watering hole meal means now. Well,
Good.
It's very relatable, actually. So thank you. Thanks for everything this morning.
It's my pleasure. And I'd like to thank everybody who's been here. I appreciate you taking out your time. And Paul, if anybody'd like to chat further, very happy to set up time, conversation. And just remember very much, it's about the conversations in your organizations that are important.
On behalf of Unique Speaker Bureau International, I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time out of your day to see Bev Hancock speaking on her excellent talk entitled Wisdom from the Watering Hole. If you would like to book her for any of your events this year, please contact us to arrange something from beginning to end. Last but not least, thank you very much to Bev for your insights. I hope to see everyone in the next From Live to Online showcase, which will feature Alex van den Heever and Renius Mhlongo. And thank you very much again.